All right, welcome back to another episode of the Blasters and Blades podcast. Hey, all you crazy sci-fi and fantasy fans, it's time for your daily dose of shenanigans over here at the Blasters and Blades. Just three nerdy veterans geeking out over our science fiction passions and fantastical fantasies. A place where magic is king, the sky is the limit, and space is the place. So without further ado, we get to introduce you to the phenomenal author, otherwise known as Ben Stevens. So Ben, can you tell us a little bit about yourself? Introduce yourself to our audience.
I will certainly try. I'm a fairly new writer. I tried publishing books myself a few years ago and didn't really have a lot of traction. And I was fortunate enough to attend a conference in Las Vegas a couple years back, and I met some people. And Athon Books picked up my debut book, and then allowed me to continue that series that never took off. And so now it has become the Invasive Species series, 4-book series. Right now there's only 3 out. And then I also managed to run a Facebook page for an author that I greatly admired, Richard Fox, whom I also met at that conference and had a little talk with, and I managed to collaborate with him and his universe on a couple of books as well. And so it's been an awesome year, and I'm hoping to keep it going, because I really enjoy what we do. And I'm a geek myself. I have been my entire life, and I'm fortunate enough to have a job where I work all over the world. Right now I'm in the Middle East, and it gives me a lot of downtime, and in that I fill that time by pulling out my laptop and working on these crazy daydreams, right, that we call stories.
What year did you go to the writers convention in Vegas?
It was the last one that actually happened, because 2019, 2020 was canceled. Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
The second part of the introduction, dear listener and viewer, is how we first found them. And so I actually first found Ben through his work with Richard Fox, because when they were setting up the fan page, since I set the Galaxy's Edge one up, he reached out and said, "Hey, how do we do this thing on Facebook?" So I helped them get that going so they could do it. And I still post there periodically, and it's a fun group. So if you haven't checked out the Ember Wars fan club, you should totally do it. Lots of inappropriate jokes about mechs when everyone knows that infantry is the best. But we forgive them.
Don't call them tanks. Don't call them tanks, Crunchy.
All right. Now we get to ask you the most important question, and it decides the tone and tenor of this interview. Are you going to get to stay? So the religion question: Star Wars, Star Trek, or Firefly?
Firefly, hands down. Absolutely, Firefly. Now, if you'd asked me when I was 10 or 12 years old, I would have said Star Wars. But now I've left the church, and I found redemption in Firefly. Captain Mel all the way.
Yeah, I used to really dig Star Wars back when all the books still counted that I loved, like Rogue Squadron and all of that.
Yeah, Timothy
Zahn, and then Disney bought it, and
Anderson.
They just crapped all over us and said, "You don't count anymore." And I'm like, okay, whatever.
Same.
You do
Same.
you. So I do still have some nostalgia for what was, but not enough to keep spending money on what is.
Couldn't say it better.
All right, now, because we're polytheistic here, Game of Thrones, Lord of the Rings, or the Potterverse?
Okay, so the Potterverse has never done anything for me. It's just not my thing. But I don't think it's fair to really compare Tolkien to Game of Thrones. Tolkien and Lord of the Rings is it's in a class by itself. It's to be admired, worshipped, studied like a holy book, the Bible itself, if you will. I would even learn Greek to study the original. I mean, that's where Tolkien's at. But if I'm just in the mood for some fun, I do love me some Game of Thrones, especially the show, not so much the books. I know this is a podcast about books, but I love the actors. I love the banter. I know they kind of crapped the bed in the last couple seasons, but I enjoyed it. I tuned in every week, and I found it very fun and thrilling, enjoyable.
Okay. So we are, because the Blasters and Plays podcast, we like both the fantasy and the sci-fi. We sort of rebranded to cover that. So which was your first love, though? Was it the sci-fi or was it fantasy?
It was definitely sci-fi. It was definitely sci-fi. I can't remember a time that sci-fi wasn't part of my world. I had discovered fantasy a little later in middle school with the Dragonlance books and the Forgotten Realms books and Dungeons and Dragons. Sci-fi to begin with.
Okay. Did you ever read any of the fantasy choose your own adventure books that were out there?
Yeah. Oh yeah. I loved them. Loved
Yeah.
them. I even got the weird ones, like for Easter, because I was into them so much. So when my parents would give me an Easter basket, it would have the Easter Bunny Choose Your Own Adventure, which was like, it's like, for me, I don't know about you or yourself or anybody that's listening, but there's people who can completely escape into any kind of fantasy, but then there's people like me, and I have to be able to kind of relate to the fantasy. I want to be able to project myself into it. So, like my brother, he loved Super Mario, but I was more of a Legend of Zelda guy because I never really enjoyed the idea of myself being this, Italian plumber jumping around in a cartoon world. I wanted to be the guy with the sword and the shield who gets the girl.
Yeah, I was always about that lone wolf, the fantasy sort of almost Dungeons and Dragons
Mm-hmm.
crawl kind of thing.
Yeah, I remember.
I passed them on to my sons too because I still had all of them. You can't get those anymore, sadly.
You get the character sheet in the back of the book.
Yeah, and then you could get and print them online and then track it that way. And of course, we never cheated because cheating never, cheaters never prosper or something. Never looked ahead.
Love it.
So, what is it about the wide world of speculative fiction that you love?
Oh man, just that. I mean, I can think of it's kind of corny, but that I think it's a quote that you see on one of these memes floating around Facebook. Just like, I don't know, remember if it was. I don't remember who said it, but to paraphrase them, it's just that in speculative fiction, in any medium, whether it's a book or a video game, or a show or something like that, you can find all the things that, as a child, you believed would be in this world. And you grow up and you can become disillusioned, or you can come to peace with it, or you can enjoy a healthy dose of spec fic, and that's your escapism, that's your outlet, that's your puts you back in connection with the things that filled your heart and mind 24/7 as a young child.
Yeah, when I was younger, I thought quicksand was going to be a lot bigger problem in the world than it turned out to be. That was the plot of almost every kid stuff.
The Bermuda Triangle. I mean, I was definitely going to figure that one out. I was on my bucket list.
Mine too. So, what was your first memory of engaging in speculative fiction as a genre? Was it watching a certain show, reading a book, playing certain games?
Well, kind of like going back to the sci-fi question, it's like I honestly can't remember a time when some sort of science fiction wasn't part of my reality. I can't remember a time earlier than that. It's always there. It was always there. I mean, I grew up on Empire Strikes Back, and I could sing the theme song to the Star Blazers cartoon before I knew the words to Jingle Bells. It was just I always had a toy, and I would take it in the backyard, and at night when my parents made me go to bed, my bed was a spaceship, and I would tuck myself in and pretend I was flying to Planet Zuby, and it was always there, dude, always.
So, how did your love of speculative fiction transition into writing stories?
Okay.
In that field.
Well, I mean, as a kid, you tinker with stuff. I remember I still have some homework assignments. My mom was cleaning up my deceased grandfather's den and found something I typed up on his typewriter about some guy with a sword and stuff and sent it to me. And so I always tinkered with stuff like that. But
all right, sorry about those technical difficulties. We asked the same question a couple times because his Wi-Fi at the hotel was kind of sketchy, but I'm cutting that out, and so when you jump back in, there'll be a little bit of an oddity. So we re-asked the question, but this was a great interview, so we did what we had to do. Slap that duct tape on that production, and we rock on. All right, so how did your love of the speculative fiction genre transition into you writing stories in that wild, imaginative space?
Okay, that's a fair question, and it's kind of a complicated one because I mean, as a young child, I tinkered with writing stories, whether it was just for fun or for homework assignments or whatever. But I never really, was like, I'm going to be a writer or anything like that. I just enjoyed my imagination and expressing it. And then as I, got older, that kind of took shape in different forms. Whether I, enjoyed video games or whatever. But for the most part, I got busy working and raising children and you're getting married and all the things that life throws at you. But throughout all that, I always gamed. I always had a table. I was always the dungeon master. and I always managed to find a group of people that wanted to, bring some chips and dice and have a good time. And so that was always there. And then at one point, not too long ago, I want to say maybe 6 years ago, I realized that writing a book takes about the same amount of work for me as creating a campaign and managing a campaign. But if I write a book, the player characters do what I want them to do. And so I just got excited with a story that people can appreciate, and not just completely trounced by deciding they want to be a dragon-born halfling infernal nimwit with I just couldn't take the backstories anymore. I said, you know what, I'm just going to do this myself, and I'm going to start writing books. And so that's how I got there.
So what system did you play?
Oh, you name it, brother. You name it. From Dungeons and Dragons to all its iterations, all its different editions, to the spin-off Pathfinder, to everything White Wolf ever created, everything Palladium ever made, GURPS, oddball indie stuff. Just you name it. There's no end to what I haven't dabbled in.
So one of these days, are you going to transition and write some games?
Yeah, I don't think so. I think I would rather find some awesome success as a writer and then have somebody make the game of my books for me.
That's the dream. So many
Right?
authors let their own real-world experiences influence the stories they tell. So were there any specific formidable moments for you that shaped you as a storyteller?
Yeah, I would have to say, I can't say a specific moment, but a specific thing, and that is my job overseas. I've been working overseas for about 8 years now, and I've traveled all over the world, met all kinds of different people, and whether it's walking down a country road somewhere in Africa, or sitting offshore on a platform during a thunderstorm and listening to ghost stories from people who believe in ghosts, literally, and voodoo and all the kinds of stuff. I spent about 4 years in West Africa, and I've spent the last year here in the Middle East, and I've been all over Europe and Canada and the United States and Central America as well, and learning about the different cultures and meeting the different people, and it just sparks my imagination. So there's a lot of actual places and foods that I've eaten and stuff that find their ways into my book.
Do you think that experience with more cultures than the average, say, American gets to experience affects when you write like alien races, and even if they're human on other planets, but when you write other cultures, do you think that helps?
Absolutely, without a doubt.
Because that's the one I think Americans tend to get a little too isolated, and they realize that they don't always realize their experience isn't the rest of the world's experience. And walking the streets of a third world country sort of smacks you in the face with that reality pretty quickly. And you realize that your experience is a little bit sheltered compared to the rest of the world. So
it absolutely is. And it actually encouraged me, like I remember coming back from my first hitch in Angola, and my son, bless his heart, I love him. He's a great kid. He's probably the best man I know. But I was noticing, like that I'd failed him in some sense, that he was, had lived a spoiled kind of sheltered life. And I was like, I vowed at that moment that we were going to take a vacation somewhere once a year, and it wasn't always going to be comfortable. We weren't going to stay in resorts and stuff. We were going to get go off the beaten path. I wanted him to see more of the real world, and I fulfilled that promise.
That's a good idea. So speaking of the real world, you were in the United States Army. So we ask all authors this who are also veterans, but how do you feel like your time in the big green weenie affects the stories you tell?
Not too much, really. For me personally, what I got out of my time in the Army was, like self-improvement. I was happy to serve, and happy to be part of a team. And, I have some memories there that might be affecting me subconsciously, but really what I got out of it was my self-improvement and realizing that I can do more than I ever thought possible. But as far as like military structure and whatnot, I'm not really a hardline military sci-fi writer. And you can even look at like one of the I was fortunate enough to get a decent review by a guy who normally reads hard military sci-fi, and he picked up Invasive Species, and he says right in the review, this was not what I expected, but I liked the ride. It was fun. My military, yes, I mean, there's my publisher. They're really good at what they do. Marketed this series as military sci-fi, and it does have a military aspect to it, especially in the first book. Not so much in books 2 and 3, but it's really marketing. And because my military structure in this series is not so much based on my experience in the real world, but it's more based on like the anime that I consumed in mass quantities growing up. Right, like the Skull Squadron going to go off and fight the Zentradi, right? Or 15th ATAC, hover tanks, blah blah blah. It was just the men and women of Earth getting in their mechs and beating up the bad guys. And so I have that aspect to the story, but I'm not really following it based on any memory of my service. It's a little loose.
Okay,
you know what I mean?
I do. I think sometimes people overthink what makes the military because they think, oh, it's got to be that dress right dress, U.S. Marine Corps, pretty uniforms, flying flags, etc. And they forget that militias exist too. Ad hoc units that sort of form together. I mean, like I would argue that the unit in Wolverines, the Red Dawn, like that was a military unit. I mean, they weren't traditional military. They weren't an organized military, but they were certainly engaging in military action as an organized unit with a chain of command. And so I think people sometimes overthinks it. As long as it's,
even to go back to my Robotech example, if you look at the last iteration of what Harmony Gold did, combining 3 different animes into Robotech, the new generation, right? It was a ragtag group of misfits that were banded together by one actual soldier who found like this guy, a farmer boy and a biker girl, and then he trained them to help him achieve his mission.
So do you ever actually, when you write, draw on people that you knew when you were in the Army?
No, I don't.
Okay. Did you ever forward deploy, or was your time more tranquil than that?
My time was extremely tranquil. I was in, believe it or not, I enlisted in 1995, and I discharged in 2001, August of 2001, 1 month before 9/11.
Okay. So I remember when I enlisted in '98, CNN did a special that world peace might finally be attainable. Boy, did they get that one wrong. So yeah, it was a different time when I went in as you were, in the process of getting out. So
right, and my little brother was getting in right as I was getting out. My little brother went to Iraq and participated in Desert Storm and all that, Iraqi freedom. So he was over there. He was the United States Marine, and he maybe still is, but he's not in the Corps anymore. He's now like a director for emergency response in the government.
That's honorable work. So we've talked about how your time in the military did or did not affect you as a storyteller, but now we're going to ask how it affects you as a consumer. So does your time in the service affect the kind of stories you engage with as a reader?
It's a good question. I don't know. I never actually thought about that. Maybe it does on a subconscious level. I enjoy military sci-fi. I like reading it. I really liked, Rick Partlow's like Drop Trooper series, and I fell in love with the Ember War series, and that's the stuff I enjoy reading. And when I write, I certainly try to, I wouldn't say emulate, but I mean they inspire me. And I can, okay, this is a good idea. And, I like what they did here. And especially the team stuff, because like, I think one of the key aspects of military sci-fi is that it's not always about an individual. It's about a team and how the team works together and comes together like Voltron to become something stronger than any one of them are by themselves. And I enjoy the banter and the dialogue of the teamwork and stuff like that. So if a military sci-fi writer is doing that kind of stuff, that's what I enjoy, but I don't know that that's directly related to anything that I did in the Army. I think it's just what I enjoy.
Okay. So transitioning from the writing side, let's talk about things from a fan angle. So have you gotten any cool fan art or had anybody cosplay your characters yet?
Yes. And let me see if I can show you without how do I show you this without
just hit the share screen and it should pop up.
Okay. Okay, share screen. And are you seeing what I'm seeing now?
Nope. All right, hold on. You send it to me, I will pop that up. So while you say that, I am going to pull that up for people. So if you could just tell the story and I will get it up there.
Okay. So one reader and his kids made this helmet for me based off the original cover of what Invasive Species was when it was first published by a different company back in 2018, something like that, 2 years before Athon picked it up. And it's really kind of cool. It's really well built, and it's got a battery inside of it. And you can actually turn on there's two different lights. There's a LED flashlight, and then there's a red laser light that both are functional. And you can put the helmet on. It fits great. In fact, that next picture to your right will show you with the light on.
Okay, let me get that up then.
Yeah, it's the next one right there. Yeah, and you see it's actually functional. And I just was completely blown away by that. That somebody, him and his kids made that. And I'm like, wow. And of course, the poor guy, I was thanking him and all this kind of stuff. And it wasn't even, I don't know, 4 or 5 months later that I announced that the out of print book had been picked up by Athon with a new cover and a new title. And he wrote, he responded to that Facebook post. He said, "New cover." I said, "Oh, I'm sorry, dude. I'm sorry. It's a great helmet, but yeah, it's not gonna look that way on the new cover."
So if they follow you on the social medias, which we'll link to at the end of the episode, will they be able to see the old cover? Just so they can sort of compare the two. Is that something that you share? I mean, obviously you've rebranded, but is that something you could share on your author page?
Yeah, it's still there. I haven't really posted much on my author page because I've rebranded, and I'm in the process of getting it, everything set back up. I have to make a new website, and I haven't done that yet. And I need to start a new newsletter, and I haven't done that yet. And it's been a rocky year for everyone with COVID and whatnot, and I've got a bunch of other things going on in my life that have kind of made me not be able to put as much energy into the website, social media aspect of writing. I'm just trying to get the manuscript written at this point and let my publisher do the heavy lifting. And I promise everyone I will get a new website up here shortly, and a new Facebook page and all of that good stuff. But unfortunately, I haven't had I haven't made the time to do it. I've got too many other fish in the fryer right now.
So how about this? If they subscribe to your newsletter when you get that back up and going, you can share the old cover with the helmet. And if anyone's curious, they just got to follow you and join your newsletter.
Yeah, there you go.
So has anyone asked for your autograph while you're out in public?
No one has. Not really, no, because I don't think I'm even close to that well known. But within the circle of people that that do know me, I got a phone call just a couple of months ago from a guy I worked with 5 years ago. We haven't spoken in years. I know who he is, and but I haven't spoken to him in ages. Well, he found my phone number somehow and called me up out of the blue and said, "Hey, you got a second?" I said, "Sure." And he said, "My son wants to talk to you." I said, "Okay." And it turns out that he bought this book, Invasive Species, for his 12-year-old son. He saw me post it on Facebook, and he bought it for his 12-year-old son. And his son, he had told his son, I know the author. I know the guy who wrote this book. And so he was getting some points there with his kid. And the kid was like, can I talk to him? And it was so cool because like 12 years old was like when it really took off for me. That's when I discovered Dragonlance, and that's when I discovered Robotech and Forgotten Realms and Dungeons and Dragons. And that was like a very pivotal age for me. And so like this kid was on fire, and he was calling me up on the phone and asking me, so what is John's power this? And what happens to the robots that? And he could just tell he was excited. And I was like, wow, like that was such a high for me. Like you don't get that from too many readers. And it was just, I know it came through a coworker and this and that, but I'm not dismissing it at all. I was high on that for a month, bud.
Definitely understand. So have you seen anybody out in public reading your books?
No, I haven't. I've given away. I had a box full of copies of the old book that's out of print, and I've given them away to people I meet in parks and businesses and stuff. I said, "Hey, I have a book." But back when the debut novel first came out, there was a trend going around. It started on my Facebook page where everyone was taking pictures of themselves reading it, and then they were sending it to me, and I collected these pictures, and I made a mural of the cover, just like those like pictures you see of political figures or whatever. And if you zoom in on each pixel, it's a picture of something, right? Yeah. So it was like all pictures of people reading my book, and then you can use a computer algorithm to organize it to where the colors will match the actual cover of the book. And so I made a copy of the cover of the book. Yeah, it was cool. It was fun. And that's the closest I've come to seeing anybody read my stuff in public.
Now, you travel the world because of your job, and so you tend to probably encounter a lot more non-English speaking readers than the average Joe. So do you plan at some point of getting this translated into other languages so you can keep the train rolling when you're overseas?
I do, and I do. I would, especially now. Obviously, I don't know if Athon's going to go for it with this series or whatnot, but at some point, I would like to pursue getting books published. If for no other reason than this, I'm currently in a relationship with somebody who's not from America, and she can read English, but I would really like to see my stuff written in her native language, and her friends all know that I'm a writer and this and that, but they're all intimidated to pick up a book in English. So, and I've been following guys like best-selling author Craig Martell, who's just put out a thriller book in German, and he's having great success at it. And it's like, that's very inspirational kind of stuff. And I would definitely like to add that to my repertoire at some point,
Yeah. I think Jonathan Brazy, I'm never sure how to say his last name. He's a former Marine turned author. I think he's done some foreign language translations as well. So it's definitely something that I think would be cool. If there's no other reason to say you've got it on your shelf. And then you can read it in German and fake it out or whatever language and pretend like, you can read those languages because you know what it said in English.
Right. I got to tell you, too, I mean, he's not I guess he is spec fic, but he's not blasters and swords and, blades or anything like that. But have you ever heard of the Japanese writer Haruki Murakami?
I have.
Okay. So you're familiar. He writes magical realism and drama, right? Dramatic literature and magical with a touch of magical realism, almost kind of like a Studio Ghibli, Neil Gaiman kind of, something slightly off. There's a little bit of magic afoot, but it's also very heartbreaking and poignant. And his books have been published in, 30 something different languages. And I can pick up a book that's obviously not written in Japanese. It's written in English. And the prose is some of the most amazing stuff I've ever read in my life. It just pierces right into you, like cuts into your soul. And I'm thinking to myself, how in the world can you do this with a translation? That's amazing to me. So, I mean, whoever's doing this, they're doing a good job. And so hats off to them.
Yeah. So finally, what's the funniest or weirdest interaction you've had with a fan since you started writing? Obviously, we try to keep this a family-friendly show.
Oh, okay. Well, I can't think of anything too family-friendly that is funny about that. Yeah, I'll have to tell you offline about what I was going to tell you.
Fair enough.
Yeah. I don't know. I can't think of anything too funny, man.
All right. Well, then this is where we will do the the highlights reel of everything you've written. So can you give us the rundown of your body of work?
Okay, sure. Now, Invasive Species is, while it's also one of the most recent books, it is a reincarnation of my debut book. And its sequels are new, have never been printed before. So there's all three of those right now, books 1, 2, and 3. Then I've done the Pathfinder novels with Richard Fox in his Ember War universe. And,
those are good, by the way. You should check them out.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Those are, in fact, Light the Way is probably my favorite book out of the books I've written right now. I really like that book. That's my cry book. So other than that, those are my only complete novels at the moment. There's all 5 of those. I have a collection of short stories, horror stories, based on the H.P. Lovecraft mythos, that's on Amazon. That's self-published, and basically it's just when I first started learning how to be a real writer, like not just toying around, but like trying my best to understand the craft and getting to know other people and following classes and discussions on Facebook and putting in the work on the, in the chair on the keyboard. I got my feet wet by writing short stories for open calls. And then as the years went by, I got the rights to those stories returned to me, and I've combined them into a collection called The Bardo of the Unquiet Mind, and then I self-published that. So it's just the 5 books in that collection of stories right now.
Okay, so those all sounded fascinating, but as you can see by the cover, which is covering the fact that its Wi-Fi doesn't support even an avatar, we're going to talk about invasive species. So where did you get the premise for this universe? How did you come up with it? Was it psychedelics, Ouija board, bad food when you were trying from the local vendors?
It's a good question, and I think you're going to like the answer, bud. It is. I'm sure a lot of first-time writers think that the first thing that they're going to write is going to be their opus, right? And so they put everything into it. And this is an amalgam of a lifetime of playing tabletop role-playing games, video games, choose-your-own-adventure books, and all that stuff. But really, what this book and its sequels are, what the whole story is when I first started working in the oil field back in 2006, 2007, I spent a lot of time away from my family. And my son was quite young at that time. And while I was gone to take care of the loneliness and the boredom and whatnot, I would start thinking of this story and, start coming up with this idea, this universe of conflict and bad guys, this and that, a backstory, and how I knew how it was going to end, I think, and all this kind of stuff. And when I came home, I would only have a couple days home, but I would spend every minute I had with my son. And so we did like a choose your own adventure bedtime story where I would just hang out with him and tell him the story where he was the character. And I would ask him, like a role-playing game, what do you do? But he was too young for dice and paper and all that kind of stuff. So it was just an oral tradition kind of role-playing game that I did with my young son. And we would pick up, I would make notes of where we stopped, and I'd go back to work for a month. And then when I came home, and we'd pick up where we left off. And we did this for about a year, and from beginning to end. And I even brought a tear to his eye once when one of the characters meets their fate in a bad way, right? No spoilers. And that's what this is a promise that I made to him that I was going to immortalize this story in print so that he could read it to his children someday.
That's awesome. So when you re-released it with Athon, did you change anything about the first novel, or just rebrand the cover and go from there?
We put another round of editing in it and made a few changes, but very minor. Just another round of editing, and then a new cover and a new title.
Okay, so before we dig into the story itself, can we talk about this glorious cover that we're looking at? That is the screen right now. So how did you come up with this cover? Like, what's the story of this fine piece of modern art?
Man, I can't take no credit for it. That is all J. Caleb design, and my chance meeting with him at the same 20 Books conference in Vegas. I met him while I was talking to a couple of other book cover graphic artists, designers. And he just seemed like a really chill, cool cat. And he gave me his business card. And I was like, dude, I'm going to be in touch. And I just told him, he has a process where he basically asks you a few questions. You answer the questions. and then like you just let him do his thing. And I'm all about that. I don't want to tell him, I don't want to micromanage somebody who's an artist. I did the same thing when I get a tattoo. I'm like, just do your thing, right? And boy, he just kicked it out the park. I'm so pleased with it. And it really matches the story. And some covers don't match the story, and that bothers me. This one matches the story to a T.
Okay. Sometimes some of the best covers I've seen, at least that I've hired, they came about when I just gave the vaguest of ideas. This is sort of what I was thinking, and then I let the artist be an artist instead of trying to over direct or side seat drive, as you were. So yeah, he did a good job. So I really dig it. Did he do the rest of the series as well?
He did.
Outstanding. So how long after you saw this first cover did you take to order this for your wall?
You want to hear something sad, brother?
What's that?
I have about a month before this book debuted, a bunch of really bad stuff happened in my personal life, and I have not even had the opportunity to have a wall to hang the book on yet, or the money to buy it myself. I've been living out of a suitcase. Been on the road since January.
Well, then it's something that's got to be on your bucket list because that's some glorious art. So we'll move on to the story itself.
When I come back,
if your publisher's listening, this would be a good gift for him. Moving on to the book itself, what would your 30-second elevator pitch for this novel be?
Okay. All right. Here we go. You ready? Should I do a voice? In an unknown future, 30 years after a mysterious cataclysm, the last human refuge on Earth finds itself besieged by a plague of magical phenomena and alien invaders. When John, a soldier in humanity's last army, takes up arms against these invasive species, he has a fateful encounter with one of the enemy. He is thrust down a path that forces him to question everything he ever believed in and fought for, a collision course with his own destiny.
All right. So if the oil fields don't work out, you could always try your hand at narrating books. So what is it? Yeah. So what is it that you think makes your series special?
Well, I mean, I can't say that it's unique, but what I think is special about it is that it's science fantasy, right? That's not something you can call it on Amazon, but it is science fantasy. It is really, it's Final Fantasy-esque, right? You're going to have equal parts magic and technology blended seamlessly together. And ultimately, just like Final Fantasy X, which is like my favorite game in the franchise, if you strip away all the trappings, you strip away the mechs and the killer robots and the aliens and the magical powers and all this kind of stuff, you strip that all away, what it is, it's actually a love story, right? It's a like star-spanned lovers kind of thing that takes all 4 books to really come to its conclusion, but it is a love story, just like, you know, Yuna, the summoner who has to go and rid the world of sin, is protected by her guardians, and one of them, you know, and they develop feelings for each other. So that's, to me, is what it's about. And I know that's not for everybody who likes military sci-fi, but if you fall in love with the characters like I did for that video game that I just mentioned, it's going to be something that sticks to your ribs. You know, it's an epic love story in a science fantasy setting.
That sounds intriguing. All right. So which science fiction or fantasy, because sometimes they do crossover, tropes do you feel like invasive species hits the best?
Well, I think we just kind of covered that. You know, it's like, it really is, it's going to be that blend of magic and, you know, the hand wavyism. You know, it certainly has its share of hand wavingism. It's like the way I like to think about when I sit down and write this series is I'm writing prose, yes. But, you know, like a lot of people, when they write or when they read, they picture the story in their mind, right? And when I picture this story in my mind, I picture it as Japanese animation, right? So you might have a really cool character like Lucy, who is this cyborg lady, you know, who looks like the angel of death, right? She looks like the people dress up for Dias de los Muertos, you know. and she's got the Aztec macuatls, right? The war clubs with the obsidian blades, but hers are high tech with neon lights on them and all this kind of stuff. And the guy shoots a bullet at her, and she slices the bullet in half, right? And I'm picturing that like a scene from Dragon Ball Z, right? I want the whirling background, whoosh, and the 20-foot jump in the air. So, those are the beats that I'm trying to hit.
Okay. So we've discussed sort of that this is a military sci-fi book. Do you think it fits into any other genres or subgenres?
Yeah, but I don't think they exist yet, right? Like that. That's why I had such a hard time launching it back before Athon picked it up, because in a lot of ways, it's urban fantasy. But when we talk about urban fantasy, readers have an expectation that the urban fantasy is our world, the 21st century of Earth, right? But what if you took urban fantasy and projected it into the future? Like if you go to like the Blade Runner 2049 setting and then throw in that urban fantasy aspect, right? Anyone familiar with games like Shadowrun or Palladium's Rifts will understand what I'm talking about, right? But I don't know what you call that.
Okay. So let's move on to the story itself. So can you tell us a little bit about your main character and what makes him or her special in the crowded field of science fiction?
Sure. John, I think what makes him special is that he doesn't really know who he is. I think the entire arc of all 4 books, for at least the first 3, the ones that are out right now, are because the 4th one he's already is more of like a redemption. But the arc of the first 3 books is John trying to figure out who he really is, in more ways than one. I don't want to give away too much, but he literally doesn't know who he is, and he also figuratively doesn't know who he is.
Okay.
On one side, he's got this duty, the sense of duty and friendship, but then there's something inside of him that is pulling him that he doesn't understand, and he has to go and figure and reconcile those 2 halves of him.
Okay. So were there any secondary characters that you liked that were especially memorable or fun for you?
Well, there's Maya, who's a like a pop idol, like going back to my inspiration of anime and stuff. She's my Minmay. She is definitely she's my Sharon Apple. She is a pop idol in the full sense of the term, and she's also a major character next to John. And of course, her guardian, Lucy, the Lady Death cyborg that I just described, who is cool. Caleb did a great job putting her on the second cover. You can see that, yes, that is a cyborg. And yes, she also looks like a skeleton. So she's my girl. I love her. I even named my Chihuahua after
her. Okay. So does your story have any bad guys that the character has to confront? Other obviously no spoilers, because we want them to read the book.
More bad guys besides the the ubiquitous aliens and demons and ghosts and things of that nature. We have probably more bad guys with names, making them more than just a walk-on character. Titled character bad guys. We probably have more of them than we have good guys. Because when I first wrote this book, like a long time ago, and then trashed it and rewrote it, and then trashed it and rewrote that, because this was my debut, right? And sometimes that's a long road. I didn't realize that I was thinking traditional publishing, and you have to have, I didn't understand that you had to have the book 1 needed to have a conclusion. So everything changed, and so we have different villains showing up in different books. But then there's always this one in the background who's always there, and it's kind of like the final boss, right? You got to work your way through the different levels up to the final boss.
Okay. So speaking of characters, your authors tend to be very mean. Not quite. You don't sound like you're quite at the George R. R. Martin level, but authors tend to be very mean to the characters. So if your characters ever met you in a back alley and they knew you were the author that put them through such torment, how do you think that interaction is going to play out?
You know what I think? I think he would walk right up to me, and I think for a moment I would be a little nervous, and he'd look me straight in the eye, maybe put out his hand even, and he would tell me, "Thank you for helping me figure out who I am." and then I would tell him the exact same thing.
Okay, that's deep. What about the cyborg? How is she going to handle things? A little different?
Oh yeah, she'd kick me in the huevos, pendejo.
or you could just make sure you add a little bit of line to her code that she can't destroy her creator or something. That never goes bad in the movies.
She's a mean girl, but she's actually she's got to be my favorite character, which is ironic because she's not the main character. And I actually pitched this to a traditional agent. He's like, well, we need to make her the main character. And I was like, no, it's just, that's not the story, bud. Sorry. Maybe when I'm ready to market, but this was for my son.
So do you think you'll ever write some other series in the universe where she might be the main character?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
I think the story's got a finite end and a finite beginning, you know?
Okay. So finally, what can you tell us about the universe? In many series, the worlds where the story is told is as much of a character as the protagonist or antagonist. So can you give us a little bit of a hint of what we can expect from the world that you've created?
Sure. It's if any readers or listeners are familiar with the games that I've mentioned, you're going to get a lot of that, right? It is really a lot of magic and weirdness in a world of high technology with a dash of post-apocalyptic thrown in there. You're going to have mechs fighting giant leviathans. You're going to have guys in power armor taking out ghost entities that can possess trash and form bodies out of detritus. And you're going to have a pop idol who's a secret terrorist and can sing songs, and her songs are magic, and it's the invocations of her voice singing is how she casts her spells. And ultimately just the setting itself, I can't give it away, it's a big spoiler, but halfway through book one it will be revealed that nothing you think about where the story is taking place is actually true. It's taking place in a completely different place than you think it is, and when you find out where they're actually at, it's going to blow your mind.
Okay. So invasive species, is clearly part of a series. I know because it says so on the Amazons. There are currently 3 books out in this series, and you said a 4th one is on the way. So after that, is their story done? Will there be more from these characters? Or are you satisfied that you've run the race with this world?
It'll be done. The 4th book will be the final book. And I actually, I apologize to everyone who's a fan or a reader that it isn't out yet. But like I said, 2020 was a bit of a curveball for everybody. Not to make excuses, but I am about halfway done writing the first draft right now, and I plan to finish it by the end of the year. And it'll be like, maybe we'll drop it as part of a box set, or just drop it by itself and then immediately turn around and release the box set or something like that. But I definitely owe everyone the conclusion to this story, including my son.
Yeah, the suddenly becoming teachers with the homeschooling from 2020 was a slowdown for a lot of authors with young families.
Yeah.
And then you realize why you never wanted to be a teacher. But so we know that all literary universes, at least the good ones, have internally consistent rules of science, technology, and magic, if applicable. So what sort of tech or magic can we expect from these books?
What sort of magic or tech? Man, you name it, bud. Over the books, we've got, like I said, singing goddesses that cast spells with their voice. We've got giant arcology cities, like you can see in the background of that cover there. It's a giant arcology, a city the size of a mountain. We've got nanomachines that turn humans into killer robots. We've got tentacled demons. We've got ghosts. You name it, but is literally, and then of course, a human military trying to fight this all at the same time. So of course, John's got his magic hammer there. You can see his magic hammer on the cover. So he's got his rifle, the standard issue fire, what they call the lawnmower, and then he's got his magic hammer. So you see a little bit of the meeting of the worlds there. It really is, like I like to tell people, it's Robotech meets Final Fantasy with a splash of Shadowrun. So that's what you can expect.
Okay. So of all the tech that you invented or brought into your universe, which one would you want to have for your daily use?
The hammer.
The hammer. All right. How would you abuse
Absolutely.
that tech? Because I know if I had a lightsaber, I'd totally be doing horrible things with it.
Oh, absolutely, brother. So like I would, from my day job, I think I would use the hammer to either, I mean, I would probably use it equally to bang up the iron that I work on out on these drilling rigs. And then I would also take it with me to every single unnecessary meeting so I could answer stupid questions in a good
Label it the complaint department.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
That's how you get things done. So does your with the title like invasive species, I think I know the answer, but does your universe have aliens in it?
Yes. Yes, it
What
does.
about fantastical creatures?
Yes. In fact, and so we asked the question without asking it directly, like, what's the difference between a fantastical creature and an alien, right? So in a world where there's magic and technology existing simultaneously, and these species, these invasive species, all come to the planet through like portals, right? They're called drops, and so they just magically appear on the world, and it's becoming a problem, right, for what's left of humanity. And one creature might look like a blue-skinned or blue-scaled arachnid that's 20 feet tall. If you threw that in a Dungeons and Dragons setting, that would be a fantastical creature. But if you want to look at it from a science fiction point of view, it's an alien. Some of these creatures can do things like, like I said, they behave like as if they were ghosts, or look quite demonic and whatnot. But ultimately, they're all really aliens, right? But they can take on an appearance and function of a fantastical creature.
So what kinds of alien/fantastical creatures did you add to your book? And obviously, if it's a spoiler, you got to just tell us because, like you said, we want people to read the book.
What types?
Yeah.
Oh, literally, the examples I used were literally from the book. Like
outstanding.
in this book one, there's a creature they call the tectonic, and it's just it's a spirit you can't see, or a force. It's a force or an entity or something that you can't see, but it possesses trash, and then uses the trash to form itself in an invincible body. So you're sitting there blasting holes in it, and it's just reforming itself by sucking more trash off the ground, right? And it really gives the good guys a run for their money, or there's like the things you see in the background here on the cover. Those are the Spartans. They're just a bunch of killer robots that have been sent to completely decimate the entire population. The main villain, bad guy, alien kind of thing that spans the entire series are like these weird creatures called harvesters, and they tend to go around. They're kind of chimeric, they got like somewhat nautical tentacles, lower half of their body, but a humanoid upper half of their body, and they have these magic glass spheres that flash green energy at people, and they just seem to be going around the entire planet capturing as many living things as possible, and no one really knows why. What's the purpose behind the capturing of all these living souls? What's the big, what's the end game? And just a little bit of all that.
Okay, so when you do add these magical or alien creatures, how do you create them? Do you let nature inspire you, or do you just make something up out of whole cloth?
A little bit of both, but I think one of the coolest things I did was back when I was actually managing my newsletter the way I was supposed to be. I put out an email asking readers to design an alien. All right, I said it's a contest. I want you to design an alien, and whichever I think is the coolest one, I'll give you a free copy of the book autographed and mail it to you. And this one guy, a reader named Aaron, came up with this really cool alien, and I've since used it not only in invasive species, but the alien also makes an appearance in the Ember War Pathfinder books that I did with Fox. So I asked Richard if I could put some Easter eggs from my universe and his universe, and he was like, absolutely. So, and vice versa. There's actually a scene in book 3 of Invasive Species when 2 of the characters are picking up a book and admiring it. And the name of the book is the Treatise on the Battle of Breitenfeld, by R. Fox.
Okay,
So
I'd read that book.
little Easter eggs back and forth, right?
Okay, so clearly this interview is winding down, and I know you've got places to be and worlds to conquer. But before we wrap this up, was there anything about invasive species that we didn't ask you that you want to tell us before we move on?
I thought about that, and not really. I mean, I think we've covered all the marks. I just I've expressed. I'm grateful for the opportunity to tell people what it's really like, so they know what it's like versus what they might think it is. And I want to thank everyone who's bought a copy. I want to thank everybody who's read a copy, left a review, and I want to thank my publisher, Athon, for giving it a shot. And I do want to say that it is. Every book can stand on its own to some extent, but it is a slow burn. I think the biggest reveal takes the entire series, at least takes all three books to, the first three books to really understand, like, oh, so like, you just kind of have to take some of these things with a grain of salt. Like, okay, so what is this storm? Why is the world post-apocalyptic? And you don't really know that until the third book, or like, why is John having this weird thing going on? And all of a sudden it makes sense. So there's small stuff that is contained within each story, and then there's a larger slow burn thing going on. And so I really want to thank the readers that are buying the sequels for coming along for the ride, because to really get the full experience, you have to get the full experience, and then you're like, oh, so it's not, you just can't I didn't put everything in that I could in book one and then just regurgitate bad guys for the sequel. It's really a story, one story that takes 4 books to tell.
Okay, and if you haven't read it, this would be a good time where we can tell you that this is actually part of Kevin J. Anderson's military science fiction story bundle that when you listen to this will be up for sale. It is part of a collection of about 10 other novels, and then a couple of military sci-fi anthologies that Kevin J. Anderson edited that are available. And so if you want to check it out, you'd be more than welcome to do it. You get, generally speaking, a good deal. You can set how much of the purchase price goes to charity, how much goes to the authors. You can sort of pick your price because it can go to charity as well. There is a minimum buy-in that's generally speaking about $15. The host gets to set that, and we're recording it before it went live, so I can't tell you that it's exactly what it's going to be. But you can, support the authors, support some charities, get a bunch of books cheaper than you could if you bought them all individually. And if military sci-fi is your jam, man, I would highly recommend you check that out. So before we shut the lights and roll up the sidewalks, Ben, can you tell us how listeners can find you?
Right now, I think the best way to find me, as corny as it is just go to Amazon and follow me, follow my author. Click on my name. You go to this title of this book, click on my name, and then follow. And every time something is published or is about to be published, you will receive an email, and you can find every one of the books in my library right there on that author page, and you'll get automatic emails from Amazon. Unfortunately, or you can find me on Facebook. Just look up Ben Stevens, but that's going to be a little bit more difficult, right? So I think for now, the best way to find me is just to go to Amazon and follow me.
Okay, and you can find us, dear listener, on our website, anchor.fm/blasters tack and tack blades, anchor.fm/blasters tack and tack blades. We're on Twitter at twitter.com/SF_fantasy_show, Sierra Foxtrot _fantasy_show. You can email us at blastersandbladespodcast@gmail.com. We promise we check it at least once a year. We have a Blasters and Blades Facebook group, which is facebook.com/blastersandbladespodcast, where we host all of the shenanigans, and Cisca posts all the inappropriate pineapple pizza memes. Truly, that heresy will get her smited one day. You can support the show at buymeacoffee.com/author J.R. Handley. Put it in the comments that it's for the podcast, and it will be so allocated. And you can also support the show over at Anchor FM with a monthly subscription, something similar to what Patreon does, if you're familiar. No pressure though, but it does help keep the lights on and the coffee brewing. So thank you for spending some of your precious time with us. For Nick Garber and Doc Cisca, I am J.R. Handley, and this was the Blasters and Blades podcast. We'll be back next week at the same time, where we'll indulge our love of nerd culture, cheesy jokes, and all things that go boom.